Emma's body slammed into the small, fragile figure of the little girl, sending both of them crashing onto the burning hot sidewalk as chaos erupted around the popcorn stand. The child's strawberry ice cream flew from her hand and shattered against the ground in a smeared pink stain. Emma felt the tiny body trembling violently beneath her arms as screams echoed through Lakeshore Park in Chicago. "Lie still," Emma whispered fiercely as she covered the girl's dark curly hair with both hands. "Do not move, my love. Do not move." Gunshots rang out again. The screech of tires sliced across the asphalt. Emma had only planned to stop for a cup of coffee before heading to her evening shift at the little diner where she worked as a waitress. She had only smiled at a sweet little girl with big round brown eyes who had been reaching for her nanny's hand. And now it had come to this. A shooting in broad daylight. The gunfire stopped as suddenly as it had begun. The space collapsed into a tense, unnatural silence. Emma slowly lifted her head, her eyes darting across the area. No car in sight. No sign of the elegantly dressed woman in the white dress from moments earlier. No one who looked like the child's guardian. Nanny, the little girl's voice was tiny and trembling like a broken breath. She could not be more than 6 years old. And Emma's stomach clenched tight. This child was alone, and in that instant, Emma had become the only adult the little girl could cling to in the world. In this moment of chaos and fear, if you are holding your breath with every heartbeat of Emma and Lily, do not forget to subscribe to our channel, like and share this story, so that even more people can listen and feel along with it. Because every share you make is a way for stories like this to continue being told. And if you are watching this video from somewhere in the world, leave us a comment to tell us where you are listening from, so that we may know just how far this story has reached to touch your heart. Emma was still kneeling on the scorching concrete, her arms wrapped tightly around the little girl, as if loosening her hold for even a second would cause the world to shatter all over again. She felt the child's frantic heartbeat pressed against her chest, the bitter salt on her tongue and the sharp burn of gunpowder lingering in the air. The screams had begun to fade now, replaced by the hurried footsteps of people running, the distant wail of sirens, yet Emma still could not let go. She had to be sure the child was safe. "What is your name?" she asked softly, forcing her voice to remain calm, though her hands were trembling uncontrollably. The girl lifted her head, her large dark eyes filled with overwhelming confusion. "Lily," she answered in a choked voice, then repeated a single word, weak as a fading breath. "Mommy, where is my mommy?" Emma glanced quickly around the park. Vendors were slowly emerging from their hiding places. Some people were already holding up their phones to record the scene. Others were helping wounded victims scattered across the grass. But no one came toward her. No one searched for Lily. There was no woman in the white dress whom Emma had seen, standing beside the child just minutes earlier. She rose to her feet, still holding Lily tightly, as she scanned the crowd and called out, "Has anyone seen the woman who was with this girl?" A woman in a white dress, brown hair, around 35 years old. No one answered. A man shook his head with a dazed expression. A trembling woman lifted her hand and pointed in the direction where the black SUV had sped off when the gunfire erupted, but she had no more information than that. Emma looked back at Lily, who was clutching her shirt with tear-filled eyes. "Do you remember your father's or Nanny's number or her name?" Lily shook her head. "I just call her. She told me if something happened I should run, but I could not run fast enough." Her shaking, guilty voice made Emma's chest ache. She gently tightened her embrace around the child. "It is all right. You did very well. You were very brave." Emma knew she had to call the police, but her hands would not stop shaking and her mind was spinning. This was not just a random shooting. The sound of the bullets, the way the SUV fled, the way no one came back for the little girl, everything felt wrong. Every instinct inside Emma was screaming that something was terribly off. She had never been someone who stumbled into trouble easily, but now she could not abandon a 6-year-old child alone in this place. Not when her mother was still missing. Not when the child's small hands were gripping her like a last lifeline. Emma drew in a deep breath and forced her fear down. "We will find your mommy, Lily, I promise, but first you must be safe. Do you understand?" Lily nodded, but did not leave her arms. Just then, a low, powerful roar sounded behind them, so commanding that Emma felt her blood turn cold. An engine thundered, brakes shrieked violently, and the tense silence of the space was torn apart by a deep, hoarse voice filled with authority. "Lily." Emma turned around, her entire body rigid, and for the first time she saw the man who would change her life forever. He stepped forward from the glossy black car that had just stopped by the roadside as though the world around him no longer existed. He wore a perfectly tailored dark suit and moved with the cold confidence of someone always in control. His black hair was neatly slicked back, His sharp features and dark eyes flashing with danger made Emma instinctively tighten her hold on Lily, but Lily reacted very differently. The child sprang from Emma's arms and ran straight toward the man with a trembling cry filled with hope. "Daddy!" He dropped to his knees and caught his daughter in his strong arms, pressing her tightly to his chest, his large hand nearly covering her small head. "My little girl, are you all right? Did anyone touch you? Did anyone hurt you?" His voice was rough, as if he were forcing himself to stay calm. "No, Daddy, she did not." The girl pointed back at Emma, who now stood frozen with pink ice cream stains on her hands and dust clinging to her clothes. The man's eyes moved to Emma immediately, not with gratitude as she had expected, but with a deep, probing, cold, and calculating gaze as though he were weighing her worth in a single instant. Emma swallowed hard, feeling his presence as an invisible pressure forcing her to step back. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice like velvet wrapped around a blade, soft yet allowing no escape. "I am just a passerby. I saw the child in danger, and Emma stopped, realizing no words were enough to describe the moment she had thrown herself into a rain of bullets to save a stranger's child. The man did not take his eyes off her. "You shielded my daughter amid flying bullets." "Anyone would have done the same," Emma replied, her voice low and dry. "No, not everyone would," he answered firmly, his gaze softening for a fleeting moment before turning sharp again. "My name is Dominic Russo." The name struck Emma's mind like a bolt of lightning. She had heard it somewhere before, in the news, in whispers, in stories people only dared to murmur behind closed doors. Dominic Russo was no ordinary man. He was a symbol of underground power, a name that made all of Chicago wary. Emma stepped back another half step, instinct urging her to run. Yet Dominic's gaze pinned her in place. "Your name, Emma Carter." "Emma Carter," he repeated slowly as though carving it into some dark corner of his memory. "You saved my daughter, Emma Carter." She was about to say it was only instinct, only luck, only coincidence. But Dominic raised a hand, silencing her. "Do not deny it in my world. Your action is not merely kindness, it is a vow, and because of that you have just become someone I must protect." Emma frowned, her whole body tense. "I do not need anyone to protect me. I only want to return to my life." Dominic looked at her, his dark eyes unblinking. "Your life from the moment you shielded my daughter has been changed forever." The words were neither a threat nor a promise. They were a declaration. Emma felt as though she had stepped through a door that could never be closed again, and on the other side lay a world she had never imagined she would touch. But as she looked at Lily clinging tightly to her father, her eyes still darting back toward Emma as if afraid she might disappear, Emma knew that somehow she was already entangled in this far more deeply than she had ever intended. And Dominic Russo, the cold and powerful man before her, would not let her walk away easily. The piercing wail of police sirens cut sharply through the tense air between Dominic and Emma as patrol cars sped in from every direction, red and blue lights flashing endlessly and attraging off the distant surface of the lake. A group of officers surged forward with weapons drawn and eyes scanning for threats. And when no more gunfire sounded, they began approaching the witnesses to take statements. One of them, a middle-aged man with a hardened yet weary face, seemed to recognize Dominic at once, and stepped forward with a hoarse, suspicious voice. "Mr. Russo." Dominic gave a brief nod without expression. "Inspector Howard." "What are you doing here?" Howard asked as his gaze moved from Emma to Lily and back to Dominic with visible strain. "I came to pick up my daughter," Dominic replied coolly after hearing she was present at the scene of a shooting. Howard exhaled and turned his eyes toward Emma. "And who are you?" "Emma Carter," she said softly. "I was only trying to help." Dominic cut in before Howard could continue. "She is the one who saved Lily's life." Howard froze for a moment, surprise flashing across his eyes for the first time, as he studied Emma from head to toe like he was trying to match her face to some invisible file in his mind. "Then we will need her statement and yours as well?" "Not here," Dominic interrupted coldly. "I will provide everything required, but Emma will come with me." Emma stared at him in disbelief. "I do not think I need to go anywhere. I did nothing wrong. I just want to go home." "You think they will leave you alone after today?" Dominic asked, without taking his eyes off her. "The shooters have seen your face. You held my daughter in the middle of flying bullets. Do you think that will not have consequences?" "And what do you think I should do?" Emma burst out. "Run and hide. I am not one of your people, Dominic Russo." Dominic stepped closer, his shadow falling over her like a heavy darkness. "No, but from the moment you shielded Lily, you became someone I am responsible for protecting." Howard moved between them with a low, steady voice. Miss Carter, we can take you to the station for your protection and to complete the preliminary procedures, but I cannot guarantee how long that will keep you safe. This was not a random attack. If it involves the Russo family, then he did not finish the sentence. But Emma understood. This was not an accident. This was a message. Dominic signaled, and a man in a black suit appeared at once. Dominic spoke to him in a cold, low voice. Find the nanny who fled. She abandoned Lily to save herself. Make sure she never works in this city again. The subordinate nodded and retreated. Then Dominic turned to open the door of the SUV. You may choose, Dominic said, in a voice so low it was almost a dangerous whisper. Either let the police take you and trust that they can protect you, or come with me, and I guarantee that no one will touch even a single hair on your head. Emma looked at Lily, who was gripping Dominic's coat tightly and still watching her as if she feared Emma might vanish. She looked at Howard, then at Dominic, then down at herself, dirty, exhausted, and dizzy from everything that had just happened. The choice was unfair, but life had never been fair to her, only temporarily. Emma said with a trembling voice, I will go with you, but only for now. Dominic nodded slightly, a flicker of satisfaction passing through his eyes despite their coldness. We will talk more later. And as Emma stepped into the SUV beside a powerful man, whose name she had known for less than an hour, she had no idea that she had just entered a world with no way back. Inside the armored luxury vehicle, the silence was suffocating. The engine purred smoothly along the northern avenue, but Emma could hear only the pounding of her own heart. She sat in the back seat with Lily beside her, still clinging to her hand, while Dominic sat across from her with legs crossed and hands clasped, his eyes never leaving her for a single second. The silence stretched thick and heavy as if one sharp breath could shatter it. Finally, Dominic broke it. Are you afraid? The question was gentle yet cut through her thoughts like a blade. Emma turned to face him. Afraid? I just witnessed a shooting and was pulled into a car by a man whose name all of Chicago whispers behind closed doors. What do you think? Dominic neither bristled nor seemed surprised. He only tilted his head slightly. Studying her carefully, I asked to know whether you act by reason or by instinct. Emma drew a deep breath. I act to survive, nothing more. And to save others, Dominic added with a raised brow. She did not answer. She could feel him probing her, weighing what kind of person she was, and she hated it. I am not your psychological experiment, she snapped. I have nothing to prove to you. I do not know who you are, and I do not want to. Dominic leaned back with folded arms. Unfortunately, you are now involved with me. I did not choose that, Emma shot back with eyes like blades. I did not choose to be caught in a Mafia vendetta. Did not choose to run into gunfire, did not choose to become a target just for saving a child. I only did what was right. Dominic looked at her for a long moment before speaking slowly and clearly. You saved my daughter, Emma, and in my eyes that is more than simply right. It is a debt. I do not need you to repay me. But I do. The answer silenced her. For the first time she saw something deeply buried in his eyes. Not a threat, but a fierce, unshakable resolve. It was for his daughter and now for her. I do not understand, she said softly, shaking her head. Who am I in all of this, a passerby, a waitress? You are the woman who chose to risk her life to protect my daughter when no one else did, Dominic said, each word ringing with certainty. In my world that is worth more than money or power. Emma shuddered as she felt for the first time the true weight of the world he spoke of. A world where loyalty was the currency, and every action carried a price, and she had unknowingly signed a contract without ever seeing it. She turned to the window as Chicago slowly fell away, and tall buildings gave way to tree-lined roads and gated mansions. I will not stay long, she murmured, as if speaking to herself. Only until the police confirm that everything is safe, then I will leave. Dominic said nothing, but the slight curve of his lips told her he did not believe that. And worse, a part of her began to doubt it too. She quickly pushed the thought aside and gently squeezed Lily's hand beside her as the child slept with her head against Emma's shoulder. In that moment, the anger and confusion faded into a strange emotion. Emma was not yet ready to name. She did not know where she was going, but one thing was clear. Nothing from this point on would ever be the same again. The SUV slowly turned onto a private stone-paved road shaded by tall trees, 2 perfectly trimmed rows of roses guiding the way like something from a fairy tale, yet hiding a chill that ran straight down Emma's spine. And when the massive iron gate opened automatically, she saw the mansion emerge beyond the trees. A Mediterranean-style estate with pale cream walls, red-tiled roofs, and winding balconies draped in white flowering vines, breathtaking in its beauty, overwhelming in its luxury, and so unfamiliar that she felt out of place from the very first glance. Dominic stepped out first and opened the door for Lily. The little girl rubbed her eyes, still half asleep. but when she recognized her familiar home, her face brightened at once. Before Emma could step down, the opposite door was already opened by an elderly woman with silver hair neatly pinned back and eyes that were sharp yet warm, dressed in a simple gray dress and holding a clean towel and a glass of water. "Sir Dominic, thank God you and the child are safe. The news of the shooting is everywhere. I nearly fainted." Dominic gave a small nod. "Thank you, Celia. This is Emma Carter, the one who saved Lily." Celia turned to Emma at once, her expression softening as she took Emma's hands without hesitation. "Thank you. There are no words for our gratitude. You look exhausted. Let me take you inside." Emma nodded, still dazed and struggling to adjust. And when she crossed the heavy wooden doors into the main hall, a cool wave of air mixed with the scent of old wood, soap, and jasmine washed over her. The interior was understated yet astonishingly refined with high ceilings, crystal chandeliers, dark wooden floors, antique paintings, towering bookshelves, and every object seeming to carry the breath of long-held power and mystery. "This is the sitting room. The kitchen is to the left, and this hallway leads to the guest bedrooms," Celia explained as if Emma were a long-time guest. "I will prepare the blue room upstairs for you. It overlooks the rose garden." Lily still clung to Emma's hand despite being home, unwilling to let go for even a moment. "Can you sleep near my room?" Emma bent and gently stroked the child's soft curls. "I am not sure how long I will be here, Lily." "Just one night is enough," Lily whispered, her brown eyes shimmering as if they held a small sky within them. Emma could not refuse and nodded, and the child tightened her grip at once. "I want you to tell me a story before bed. Mommy always does." Dominic stood quietly by the door watching them, his gaze no longer cold but filled with something thoughtful and unsettling. "She will stay," he said calmly, but without allowing argument. "At least until I determine who was behind the attack." Emma turned to protest, but Celia touched her elbow gently with a look of sympathy. "Just for a while, dear. Let the children be safe first." Emma no longer knew when she had become part of that phrase, the children. Yet she had no strength left to argue, and let Celia lead her up the wide wooden staircase, with Lily walking steadily beside her, one hand holding Emma's and the other clutching a stuffed toy from somewhere unknown. The blue room was true to its name with pale blue curtains, a white bed neatly made, silk pillows arranged with care, and a window opening onto the rose garden glowing with sunset gold. "If you need anything, simply ring the bell," Celia said as she placed fresh towels and sleepwear on the bed. "I will bring some food later." Emma nodded and sat on the bed's edge, the scent of dust and dried blood still on her hands. Lily climbed onto the bed and pulled Emma closer. "Will you tell me a story?" Emma opened her mouth to refuse, then exhaled softly and removed her shoes to sit beside the child. "What story would you like to hear?" "About a princess, but no prince. Only the princess and her castle." Emma smiled faintly. "All right. I will tell you about a brave princess who saved herself from a dangerous place." Lily rested her head against Emma's arm and soon fell asleep, her breathing even as the room sank into silence. And Emma sat still watching the sleeping child's face as a strange, tender emotion rose within her, stinging her eyes. She did not know what she was doing in this place, but she knew one thing for certain: she could not abandon this child, not after what had happened. Never. Emma awoke as early sunlight filtered through the blue curtains and brushed her cheek. And for a brief moment, she forgot where she was. The room too quiet, the sheets too soft, no traffic noise, no footsteps from neighboring apartments as usual, only birds singing outside the garden and the faint scent of roses in the air. She sat up with tangled hair, still wearing yesterday's clothes. The small clock on the bedside table read 8 in the morning. She thought of the small diner where she worked, of coworkers covering her shift, of hourly wages and rent bills waiting, and she sprang from the bed as if jolted, rushing toward the door to find Dominic and demand to leave, because no matter how warm the mansion was, it remained too foreign, too dangerous, and too much not hers. Celia was in the kitchen preparing breakfast, and only smiled gently when she saw Emma's confused face and uncombed hair. "Sir Dominic is in the library, the last door at the end of the right corridor." Emma thanked her with a nod and hurried on. The heavy wooden door opened, and the scent of old wood and leather enveloped her. Dominic's library was nothing like in the movies. No grandeur, only tall shelves of books, a large ebony desk, and gentle light from a high window. Dominic stood by the window in an open white shirt holding a cup of coffee, and turned calmly as if he had known she would come. "I need to leave," Emma said at once with firm resolve. "I cannot stay here. I have a job and a life of my own." Dominic did not answer immediately. He set the cup down and slowly walked toward her, each step adding weight to the tense air. "Do you think you can return to that diner?" Stand behind the counter in a grease-stained apron as if nothing happened. Emma lifted her chin. I am not your hostage. No, you are not, Dominic said quietly. But I cannot let you leave. While I do not know who fired those shots yesterday, they did not only target me. They fired in a public park in broad daylight without hesitation. Do you think they will leave you alone when they know you were the one who shielded my daughter? I am not important in your story, Emma said, struggling to stay calm. I was only passing by. Not anymore, Dominic replied softly. You chose to stand in front of the most precious child in my life. That is no longer coincidence. In my world, that is a declaration of war. To them, you have become my weakness. Emma froze as the truth in his voice cut through her. Cold, bare, and dangerous. I do not want to be part of your world, she said, her voice trembling for the first time. Dominic was silent for a moment, then stepped closer until only a short distance remained between them. I understand, but I will not let you be killed for doing the right thing. Emma looked into his eyes and for the first time saw more than command and cold authority. She saw genuine concern, and for the first time she believed him. Just enough to breathe out. I will stay, but only until everything is clear. Dominic nodded. Temporarily, the words settled between them like an unspoken agreement, without chains and without promises, yet enough for both to know they had taken another step toward each other whether they wished to or not. And as Emma turned and walked out of the library, her heart felt lighter yet far from peaceful, because deep down she knew that in the world of Dominic Rousseau the meaning of temporary could easily last forever. Emma could not pinpoint the exact moment when everything began to change, only that after that morning in the library she no longer felt like a lost guest but slowly became part of a silent machine that moved with order and hidden purpose. She had not yet left the mansion as promised, yet every sense in her remained alert and guarded as she observed every detail of the house, like an outsider trying to understand where she truly stood. Dominic was rarely seen during the day, leaving early and returning late at night, often after Lily was already asleep, and each time he returned, the house fell into a complete hush, as if everyone knew not to disturb him. Celia never spoke much about Dominic, but she did not need to. Emma learned through the servants' eyes, through the way they bowed their heads and avoided his gaze. Dominic Rousseau was not merely the master of this house. He was the man everyone feared. One afternoon, while sitting with Lily in the back garden, Emma accidentally overheard a quiet but tense phone conversation between two unfamiliar men in suits near the garage. They mentioned a name unknown to her, and then one said, Mr. Dominic said no commotion, handle it cleanly, leave no trace. Emma's heart turned cold, and she immediately took Lily away without a word. That evening, Dominic came home earlier than usual, and for the first time sat with Emma and Lily in the living room. Lily was visibly delighted while Emma felt shy and awkward. Dominic seemed at ease with one arm around his daughter, and his gaze lingering on Emma longer than before. Lily tells me you are a wonderful storyteller, he said in a low, unexpectedly gentle voice. She tells me stories about a princess who does not need a prince. Lily chimed in excitedly. Dominic let out a soft laugh. Sounds like she is learning independence. She chose that story herself. Emma replied quietly. Dominic studied her. You always choose the path no one dares to take, do you not? Emma did not answer and simply met his eyes. She was no longer the frightened woman curled up in his car on the first day. She had seen more, known more, and was trying to understand the man before her. That night, as she passed the hallway on her way back to her room, she glimpsed Dominic in his study through the half-closed door. A strange man with a scar running from temple to chin stood before his desk with his head lowered. Dominic neither shouted nor raised his voice, but every word that fell from his lips sent a chill through her spine. I told you not to touch women and children. One more time and you will not get a chance to correct your mistake. His voice was calm and sharp as a honed blade. The man trembled and nodded rapidly. Emma turned away at once and returned to her room with her heart racing. Who was Dominic really? The father who read to his daughter, the man who gave orders she did not dare imagine, the man who held a child close to his chest and also threatened another without lifting a hand. She did not know. She only knew that Dominic Rousseau was a living contradiction. Part of him made her want to flee. Another part made it impossible for her to look away. She lay on her bed, staring up at the high ceiling, trying to erase the image of those dark eyes from her mind. But the more she tried, the clearer they became, and she began to realize that the danger Dominic carried did not lie only in the world he lived in, but also in the way he was slowly breaking down the walls around her heart with silence, with glances, and with truths she was not yet ready to name. One serene afternoon, sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting pale, golden streaks along the stone path leading to the back garden, where Emma and Lily sat together on the wooden swing beneath the old oak tree. The air was fresh with soft winds carrying the scent of jasmine and birdsong. Lily held her worn stuffed rabbit pressed against one ear and stared quietly into the distance. Emma sensed the child's unusual silence and gently touched her shoulder. "Are you sad today?" Lily did not answer at once but tightened her grip on the toy, and after a long pause spoke in a voice as light as passing wind. "Aunt Emma, my mommy used to sit here with me in the afternoons, just like this." Emma was startled because since her arrival no one had mentioned Lily's mother. Not a photograph, not a single story, as if the woman had never existed. "Do you miss her?" Lily nodded without looking at Emma. "My mommy was very beautiful. Long blonde hair like the princesses in stories. She used to sing when she bathed me and told stories with a voice as gentle as the wind. But she was very sad." Emma squeezed the small hand gently and waited. "My mommy did not like living here. She said this place felt like a glass cage. There were always eyes watching and ears listening, and she could not breathe. She was afraid of the men in black who walked around the house. She said Daddy was dangerous." Lily's voice trembled. Emma swallowed hard, unsure how to respond because the words were too heavy for a 6-year-old, and all the more truthful for it. Then one day Mommy hugged me for a long time and said she had to go very far away. She said she loved me very much but could not stay. She promised to write letters but she never sent anything. Lily turned to Emma with shining brown eyes. "Do you think Mommy still loves me?" The question struck deep into Emma's chest, not only for Lily but for herself because her own childhood was filled with the same unanswered absences and broken promises. "I think your mommy loved you so much that she believed leaving was the only way to keep you safe," Emma whispered as she softly brushed the child's curls. "But you did nothing wrong. It was never your fault." Lily blinked, tears clinging to her lashes. "Daddy never speaks badly of Mommy, but he never tells me about her either. I think he is angry because she left." Emma fell silent. Dominic Rousseau, the powerful and feared man, had chosen silence when it came to the woman who once left him. No blame, no stories, only a wound hidden where no one could touch it. She did not know what had happened between them, only that he had chosen to raise his child alone in a closed world, a gilded cage few could enter. And now somehow she had become the only one Lily trusted with her deepest truths. "Aunt Emma, will you ever leave?" Emma froze as she looked into that fragile, hopeful face. She had always believed leaving was the only right choice, because she did not belong here or in this dangerous hidden world. Yet each time Lily held her hand and called for her before sleep, those reasons blurred. "I do not know what will happen, Lily," she said softly. "But I will not disappear like your mommy. I will tell you if I ever have to go somewhere, and I will always come back if you need me." Lily leaned her head against Emma's shoulder with a quiet sigh, as if that promise alone steadied her heart. The sunset bathed the garden in gold, and the wind whispered through the trees. And Emma knew that whatever the future held in this moment here in the embrace of an abandoned child, she could not be the second person to leave. She could not. Ever. Dominic stood silently behind the glass frame on the second floor, where he could look straight down into the back garden, where Emma and Lily were spreading a small cloth across the grass, preparing what Lily liked to call a picnic at home. He had never been the type to observe others in such stillness. But since Emma stepped into his world, all the rules he had once lived by were quietly shifting. She was unlike anyone he had ever known. Not timid before his power, and not eager to win his favor. She was simply herself, whether she stood inside the mansion of a man whispered to be dangerous or not. He had once believed her presence would be only temporary, an unavoidable consequence of the shooting. Yet as the days passed, he found himself noticing small things, the way Emma brushed Lily's hair each morning, the way she patiently explained the stars to the child every night, and the way she laughed a sound, light as wind, yet capable of reaching the coldest corners of his heart. Dominic began having dinner at home more often, something that had rarely happened before. He spoke little, sitting at the head of the table watching the two of them talk, and sometimes smiling when Lily recounted garden adventures as if they were great journeys. Emma always acted naturally, yet Dominic did not miss how her eyes occasionally drifted toward him, especially when Lily said something that made both adults laugh. One late night, when the mansion had fallen into silence, Dominic stepped into the library and found Emma sitting on the sofa reading with Lily, curled asleep in her lap. The book slipping from the child's hand, Emma looked up, saw him, and quickly lifted a finger to her lips for silence. Dominic only nodded and walked closer. "Do you tell stories like this every night?" he whispered. "She cannot fall asleep without at least one chapter." Emma replied softly, gazing at the soft curls resting on her lap. Dominic studied the scene as if it were something too fragile, too distant from his world. "You are very patient," he said. Emma did not answer at once, then looked at him with softened eyes. "Because she deserves to have someone beside her, even if only temporarily." Dominic looked at her for a long moment, and in that brief instant, realized his heart no longer kept the steady rhythm of a man who always knew his next move. It faltered because of a woman who possessed nothing but courage and a warm heart. The next morning when Emma entered the kitchen, she was surprised to find Dominic already there, making coffee. He turned and handed her a cup without a word. She accepted it with a quiet thank you and sat down. They remained silent, yet it was not an awkward silence but one that wove an unspoken understanding. In the days that followed, Dominic appeared more often, never intruding on her life with Lily, yet always somewhere close enough to hear his daughter's laughter and feel the presence of the woman slowly filling the empty corners of his house. One evening after Lily had gone to sleep, Emma sat alone on the second-floor balcony, gazing at the star-filled sky. Dominic stepped out with a glass of wine. "I cannot remember the last time I looked at the sky," he said. Emma turned and shrugged. "You should try it more often. It makes one feel small but also at peace." Dominic sat beside her and they remained quiet for a while. Then he spoke slowly as if weighing every word. "I once believed I needed no one, that the world held only two kinds, the ones who live and the ones who are eliminated, but then someone leapt into gunfire for a child who shared no blood with her and suddenly nothing was simple anymore." Emma looked at him, her own inner turmoil unhidden this time. Something was forming between them, vague yet undeniable. Dominic was no longer the cold shadow in whispered street stories. He was a father and a man whose heart could tremble at gentleness, and Emma was no longer a lost woman. She was becoming something far more important. The first seasonal rain poured down on Chicago without warning, like anger with no restraint blanketing the sky in heavy gray. In the study, Dominic stood motionless before his desk, fists, clenched eyes fixed on the phone screen that had just ended a call. A moment before he had believed he could keep Emma safe simply by hiding her from the underworld, but the message he had just received shattered that fragile calm. They knew her name, they had her image, and a name from his past had appeared among those now watching her with dangerous interest. Marco De Luca, his longtime rival, the one who never forgot a blood feud with the Russo family. Dominic knew Marco never missed a target twice, and this time the target was the woman who had unwittingly become his weakness. The study door opened and Emma's footsteps sounded softly on the wood. She carried 2 cups of coffee, intending to speak, but froze at the tension on his face. "Is something wrong?" she asked. Dominic lifted his gaze, and for a moment all the emotion he kept buried nearly surfaced, yet was restrained with frightening calm. "Emma, you need to sit down now." She set the cups down and took the chair opposite him, watching every movement. Dominic did not evade the truth. He told her about the call, about Marco, about how she was being watched. His voice never shook, yet his eyes held a worry she had never seen before. Emma listened without blinking, moving from confusion to fear and finally overwhelming panic. "You are saying I am being followed," she whispered. Dominic nodded slowly. "They believe you are someone important to me, and in my world, that alone is enough to make you a target." Emma pushed her chair back, clutching her head, her heart racing. "Why me? I was only a passerby. I do not belong in your war." "Not a passerby anymore, Emma," he said quietly. "From the moment you held Lily in the rain of bullets, you stepped into the world I live in." "Then what are you going to do?" she whispered, nearly drained of strength. Dominic looked at her for a long time, then spoke each word as if carved in fire. "I have 2 choices. One is to take you far from here to a safe place with my men guarding you day and night. But no matter how far you go, Marco will find you, and that only delays the inevitable." Emma swallowed. "And the second choice?" Dominic stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "Marry me." The words struck the air like thunder in a storm. Emma lifted her head, eyes wide. "Are you insane?" "No," Dominic replied with glacial calm. "In this world, the wife of Dominic Russo is not an easy target. It carries another meaning. It is a declaration. It is the strongest shield I can place around you." Emma sprang to her feet, stepping back as if distance could shield her from the weight of his words. "You cannot force me to marry you for safety." "I am not forcing you," Dominic said. "I am laying the choices on the table. You may leave, and I will still protect you at any cost. But I cannot guarantee they will not reach you before I do. If you stay, become my wife, the rules change." Emma stood frozen, no longer hearing the rain, nor distinguishing the rhythm of her heart from the pounding of fear in her chest. She looked at Dominic and saw not control in his eyes, but a silent plea. He was trading his cold armor to offer what he had never given anyone before: trust. But to be the wife of a Mafia lord was a madness she had never dreamed of. And now she was forced to choose between fragile freedom or safety within a marriage, where the line between obligation and emotion had long begun to blur. Emma could not remember how she left the study, only that when her feet finally stopped moving, she was standing in the back garden of the mansion where rain-soaked lavender blossoms trembled in the evening wind. and she felt cold not from the weather but from the truth that had just been spoken, like a sharpened blade cutting through every principle she had ever tried to hold on to. Marriage to Dominic Russo? Only a few weeks earlier she had been an ordinary waitress, living day to day through exhausting shifts, small, fragile dreams, and quiet doubts about a dim future, and now she was standing at a crossroads no one could have imagined. She sank onto a wooden bench near the flowers with trembling hands tightly clasped together. Dominic's voice echoed in her head with unbearable clarity. "If you are my wife, they will not dare touch you." The words pierced deeply into memories she had buried long ago, and she closed her eyes as the past flooded back. She saw herself at 5 years old, curled up outside a bus station, clutching a torn backpack and watching the last bus carrying her foster parents disappear forever. She had once believed they loved her, believed that after countless moves she had found a true home at last, but they left her behind like an expired possession. As if affection could be measured by conditions and expectations, she passed through 3 orphanages and learned to stay silent when ignored. I learned not to cry when rejected. She grew strong yet also cold, and only when she became an adult standing on her own feet did she learn how to survive without anyone. No one was obligated to stay. No one was obligated to love her, and now a man stood before her and said he was willing to place her at the heart of his brutal world to protect her. Whether it was for Lily or for honor, it was still a promise unlike anything she had ever known. Dominic did not promise love, and did not paint any illusion. He offered only a stark truth. Either she stepped into his world as the most protected woman, or she continued living in the terror of being hunted. And in that world, an unnamed woman was always the easiest prey. Emma opened her eyes and brushed the rain from her knees and realized she was no longer that abandoned child. She had survived everything, but now she was no longer thinking only for herself. She was thinking of Lily, the little girl who had lost her mother and grown up in a world where affection always came with conditions. If Emma left, what would become of her? Who would braid her hair each morning and tell her princess stories each night? Dominic was a good father, but he could not fill the void of a mother. And if she stayed not as a temporary guest, but as a true part of this household, could she become what the woman before her could not? Emma had never believed in fate, yet every road in her life seemed to lead to this moment. She did not know if she could ever love Dominic, but she knew he had never pretended to be anyone but himself. Blunt, dangerous, and strangely the only place where she no longer felt lost. The wind rose, carrying the scent of wet earth and lingering doubt. Emma stood and lifted her gaze to the window, glowing with warm light where a man had just placed his honor, his life and his heart on the board for an ordinary woman. And for the first time in her life she realized she had the right to choose not between right and wrong, but between fear and courage. She did not know whether this choice would bring happiness or new pain, but she knew one thing with certainty: she no longer wanted to run. Not from the past, not from herself, and not from the man awaiting her answer. Emma entered the study as the clock struck 9 in the evening, where Dominic sat quietly beneath the soft yellow light amid unfinished documents. He lifted his gaze and his eyes immediately settled on her face, as if sensing that something was about to change. She stood for a moment with hands gently clenched before her abdomen, her breathing slow yet resolute. "I agree," she said steadily without trembling or hesitation, as if every word were forged of steel. "Temporarily until this is over, but I have conditions." Dominic showed no surprise, as if he had known this moment would arrive, only not so soon. He nodded and gestured for her to sit. "Speak." Emma drew a deep breath. "I will not be a decoration. I will not sit quietly like a doll at your side. I need to know what is happening, at least what concerns the safety of Lily and myself, and I will not pretend to love you before others. We marry for safety, not for affection." Dominic studied her for a long time, then gave a slight nod, and a faint smile touched his lips, not mocking but quietly respectful. "I do not need you to pretend, I only need you here alive, breathing, and safe." The news of Dominic Russo's wedding spread through the inner circle like a fierce summer wind, and no one dared to ask much, though all were stunned. Dominic had never allowed any woman into his private world, much less openly and lawfully into his life. Preparations began almost at once. The mansion was meticulously cleaned, and white and mint-colored flowers arrived by truck from Elite Gardens. A private designer was summoned to craft Emma's wedding gown in less than 72 hours. She stood before the mirror draped in the first white fabric, feeling as if she were living inside a strange dream she had not yet woken from. When asked about the style, she replied, simply refined and understated. Dominic chose the ring without asking her preference, and the next day a small box appeared in her room containing a platinum band with a modest, exquisitely cut diamond, shining with restrained elegance. Emma gazed at it for a long time, then carefully closed the box. She was not ready to wear it yet. Lily was the most excited of all. asking endlessly about the dress, the cake, the flowers, then whispering to Emma with shining eyes that she would be the flower girl, and asking whether she should scatter petals or bring her stuffed rabbit along. Emma laughed and embraced her, feeling for the first time a trace of lightness amid the relentless tension. Dominic remained as reserved as ever, yet Emma sensed the change in the way he passed her in the corridors, the way his gaze lingered longer, and the gentle questions like, "Have you eaten and has anyone bothered you?" began to appear more often. On the night before the wedding, Emma sat alone in her room, gazing into the garden beyond the glass, where everything seemed too quiet compared to the storm within her. She had never believed in marriage, nor in the idea that a contract could bring peace, but she believed in actions. Dominic had protected her, had gone to every length to shield her and Lily from the shadows outside, and if the price of that safety was a ring on her finger and a marriage certificate, then perhaps she was ready to step through that door, whatever lay beyond it, because for the first time in many years she no longer felt alone, and that to Emma was worth more than any fairy tale wedding she had ever dreamed of. The days leading up to the wedding passed so quickly that Emma sometimes could not keep pace with the strange reality she was living. Each morning awakening in the spacious, elegantly decorated room, she wondered whether she was still the same girl who once lived in a cramped one-room apartment and hurried between greasy tables in a small corner diner. Dominic never interfered with the wedding preparations, yet he was always there when needed. One afternoon, while Emma was trying on shoes in the dressing room, Dominic entered with Lily, who beamed with delight in her new floral dress chosen by her future stepmother. Emma saw Dominic leaning against the doorway with arms crossed and a quiet satisfaction in his eyes as he watched Lily spin in her white dress. She met that gaze, and in a brief, fleeting moment, they both smiled for no particular reason, except for the quiet warmth that slipped between the hurried rhythms of their lives. They began sharing dinners more often, no longer in silence but in small conversations that slowly revealed the truths of who they were. Dominic spoke of his youth, of the years when his father was still alive, and every trial had been nameless yet relentless. Emma did not ask much, but each time he touched the past, she felt the cold armor around him crack, just enough to reveal the man who had endured and lost, and fought to protect the one thing he had left, Lily. One night, when a sudden blackout struck the mansion amid the rush of preparations, Emma stepped into the dark hallway with a small flashlight intending to find help, but collided unexpectedly with Dominic. They froze, then laughed softly when they realized they were both in sleep robes, each holding a small light. Dominic led her along the corridor up to the rooftop where the city lay in darkness below. They stood close together in the cold wind, saying nothing. Yet the silence felt strangely peaceful. Dominic looked at her hair lightly tangled by the breeze, his eyes reflecting the dim, distant city lights, and said in a low, honest voice that he had never thought he would do this a second time. "Marry someone?" Emma turned and answered softly that she had never thought she would marry anyone at all. They laughed, not in irony but in shared understanding deeper than words. The next day, as Emma reviewed the guest list with the staff, Dominic stepped in and placed a small box before her, calling it an early wedding gift. Inside was a simple, finely crafted, star-shaped pendant, and he added that it was for the nights she still looked to the sky, searching for answers before turning away, leaving Emma suspended in an emotion growing steadily in her chest, something deeper than sympathy and not yet named. The dawn of the wedding day arrived beneath a veil of mist, draped over the mansion grounds that could not dim the splendor of the ceremony prepared to flawless detail. Rows of pure white flowers curved along the archway leading to the back garden, where the small platform had been set amid the most radiant blooms shimmering in the early summer light. Guests arrived early, mostly figures of the elite, along with powerful men of the shadowed world Dominic could not ignore, all impeccably dressed with grave expressions and open curiosity about the woman about to become Dominic Russo's wife. In the upstairs room overlooking the garden, Emma stood before the mirror in an ivory gown that softly traced her slender frame, her hair swept into an elegant updo adorned with delicate baby's breath. Her reflection held calm and a fragile doubt, as though she still could not believe she would soon step outside and speak vows before hundreds. Lily entered first in a cream princess dress with a crown of flowers, eyes shining as she whispered that Emma looked like a fairy, and hugged her so tightly that Emma felt the child's innocence anchoring her in place. When the music began its measured guiding rhythm, Emma walked the white aisle strewn with petals, unescorted yet her gaze fixed steadily on Dominic, where he stood tall in a perfectly tailored black suit, his eyes never leaving her for a single second. The world seemed to fall silent as she stepped onto the platform, and Dominic offered his hand, neither hurried nor forceful, but with a gentle certainty that spoke of choice. She placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth and steadiness of his palm as the officiant began in a deep, solemn voice. When it came time for Dominic to vow, he did not read nor recite a script, but spoke straight from his heart, saying that he could not promise to be a perfect husband, for the world he lived in did not allow such purity, but he promised to protect her, as he always had to place her and Lily above all else. And though he did not yet know what they were becoming, if fate had brought her here, he would never allow her to walk away again. Emma's chest tightened at the simplicity that shattered her defenses as she looked into his eyes and saw sincerity, and the hidden fear of a man thought to know no fear. She whispered that she did not know how far they would go, but if she had to choose where to stand today, she would choose to stand beside him. And from that moment no one doubted the truth of what lay between them. As the ring slid onto her finger, applause rolled through the garden, and the music rose in swelling emotion, while Dominic leaned down to kiss her brow, not urgently but with a touch so light and real it sent her heart off beat. In that instant, the world beyond vanished. No battle lines, no enemies, no fears intruding between them, only two wounded souls who had found one another, standing hand in hand at the doorway of a new chapter. Neither yet knew how to write, and as sunset cast pale amber over the trees, Emma knew that though this marriage had begun for safety, perhaps it would one day endure for love. After the wedding, the atmosphere settled into a strange hush as the garden lights faded one by one. The guests departed, and Lily kissed Emma goodnight before the staff took her upstairs to bed, leaving the entire mansion wrapped in an unfamiliar stillness with no laughter, no watching eyes, only two people who had just exchanged vows now standing across from each other in the warm glow of their bridal chamber, where candlelight cast their shadows upon the pale limestone walls. Emma was still in her wedding dress with the veil removed and her hair falling softly over her shoulders, while Dominic poured 2 glasses of wine, his tie loosened and his jacket draped over the back of a chair. Neither spoke at first, and only the gentle clink of crystal between their hands marked a quiet, unspoken agreement. He offered her a glass, and his gaze lingered on her longer than usual, before he spoke in a low, near whisper that he thought they should begin with what was most real. Emma tilted her head slightly and pressed her lips together before nodding that she still could not believe this was real. Dominic smiled faintly and sat near the window, saying that if this were a dream, it was the first one he did not wish to wake from. She stepped closer, slipped off her shoes, and sat opposite him with her legs folded beneath the gown, and the wineglass turning slowly in her fingers as she asked whether he was afraid. He looked surprised at the question, and asked of what, and she replied that she feared they might hurt each other because everything was too fast, too strange, and yet too real. He was silent for a moment before answering honestly, without his usual cold armor, that he was afraid, but that he feared her disappearing even more. The fragility in his voice made Emma's heart sink, not from sweetness, but from the recognition of loss only those who had truly suffered could understand. She stood and moved to the window where night draped the city in quiet velvet darkness, and Dominic followed, standing just behind her at a careful distance, until for the first time he placed his hand lightly on her shoulder, not to command, but to offer a silent support that told her she was no longer alone. He confessed in a hoarse whisper that he was not a good man and had done things she might never forgive if she knew, and she turned to him without judgment or fear, and said she did not need a good man but a real one, and that she too carried a past and had once hated herself for the choices survival forced upon her. A long silence passed between their locked gazes before she set down the wineglass and took his hand gently, leading him toward the bed, not out of duty or custom, but because for the first time she truly wished to be beside him. He understood without words and guided her to sit beside him, their hands clasped like an unspoken vow, unhurried and unforced, with only soft touches affirming that both were truly present without defense or disguise. And that night it was not candlelight or silk that warmed the room, but the full presence of 2 wounded souls stitching themselves together with a fragile yet genuine trust. And in the long silences and whispered breaths, and in the embrace that was not tight yet enough to thaw frozen hearts, Emma understood for the first time that love sometimes need not be named, but only arrive at the right moment with the sightes habillé, right person, and grow patiently from broken pieces that once seemed impossible to fit together. And Dominic, who had believed his heart dead for years, learned that a quiet vow in the night could hold more power than 100 daylight declarations. The morning after their wedding dawned with a rare calm over the mansion, as Dominic left early for a meeting with important partners at a secluded site not far away, while Emma awoke later than usual and smiled unconsciously at the warmth, lingering in the pillow beside her, the tender echoes of the night, still playing in her mind like a wordless melody. She had breakfast with Lily in the kitchen, laughing softly as though the world beyond the walls no longer held terror, but everything shifted only hours later, when a strange, urgent call was transferred to Dominic's office phone. And though Emma usually did not interfere, Something in the caller's tone froze her where she stood as broken words reached her, ears, ambush, trap, betrayal tightening her chest in fear. Without waiting another second, she raced to the security wing, demanding to know where Dominic was. And though one guard resisted under strict orders, Emma's frantic resolve broke his restraint, and after a tense argument, she was given the contracted after AV location. Ignoring all protests, she grabbed a coat, leapt into the nearest car, and ordered the driver to rush to the site. Her heart pounded as if it would tear free from her chest as one part of her feared the worst, while another surged with a fierce instinct to act to protect the man who had risked everything for her. When the car turned onto the dirt road leading into the abandoned compound, she sensed at once that something was wrong with no security vehicles, no guards, only a deadly silence. She leapt from the car, ignoring the driver's shouts, and ran across the open ground into the main structure just as gunfire shattered the air. She took cover behind a wall and saw Dominic pinned down by at least 3 armed men, clearly there not to negotiate. He was pressed behind a concrete pillar, gun in hand, but bleeding from his left shoulder, staining his white shirt, though his face remained steel. Cold and warning flashed in his eyes when he glimpsed her in the corridor. Without thinking, Emma turned and ran back to the car, tore open the trunk and seized the emergency flare launcher. She remembered Dominic had once shown her during safety training. She raced back near the building, raised it skyward, and activated the alarm. A piercing howl ripped through the air like a death signal, and the ambushers panicked as Dominic's security team, who had been ordered to wait at a safe perimeter, stormed in like a tidal wave. Gunfire erupted violently for several minutes, before collapsing into a heavy silence. Dominic staggered from cover, his eyes locking on Emma as she stood there, trembling, pale yet unafraid. He rushed to her and crushed her into his arms as if loosening his hold would make her vanish, and whispered hoarsely that she was insane. And she answered against his chest through uncontrolled tears that she was, but without that madness she might have lost him that day, and he only held her tighter as amidst bloodgun smoke and the cold earth their love ignited, with a violence as real as it was aching. Dominic was brought back to the mansion that very night after the ambush, the wound in his shoulder not life-threatening but painful enough to force him into several days of rest, and Emma did not leave his side for a single moment. She changed his bandages, wiped the sweat from his brow, and sat beside him through the long hours of night just to be certain that his breathing remained steady, that the man was still here alive, and looking at her with an expression she could no longer explain by any reason, other than the undeniable truth that her heart had long since stopped standing on the outside. Dominic remained silent, not from coldness, but because every time he met Emma's eyes he feared that if he spoke, everything he had restrained would flood out and nothing would ever be the same again. Yet that silence could no longer protect them. And one afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the window, laying a pale golden band across the bed, Dominic took Emma's hand, his fingers trembling slightly, while his gaze no longer retreated. And he said that perhaps he should have spoken. Long ago, that he did not know when it began, or where it truly. He started, but every time she entered the room, everything inside him softened, and he had once believed he could keep her beside him out of duty and out of concern for safety. But that had been a lie, and that he needed her because he loved her, in a way that was deeply and unmistakably real. Emma stood frozen, not in shock, but because her heart felt as though someone had finally struck the one final chord it needed to shatter every defense she had built over these days. She rose and stepped toward the window as if to escape his eyes, and said that she had once believed no one could ever love someone like her, that she was not perfect, nor as strong as others imagined, that she was an orphan who had always run, and always feared affection because she feared loss, and then he had appeared carrying with him a world she had never imagined she could belong to. Dominic pushed himself upright despite the pain in his shoulder, refusing to let her drift farther, and told her that she did not need to belong to his world because he would make that world belong to her. She turned back and silent tears fell down her cheeks, not from sorrow but from emotions long suppressed at last being released. And she confessed that she was afraid that if she loved him, if she allowed herself to believe in this, then one day it would vanish because she had already lost too. Much to dare trust happiness. Dominic stepped down from the bed, each movement forcing a grimace, yet he still came to stand before her and told her to let him be the one who would not disappear, to let him be the one she would not need to fear losing, as he lifted his hand to wipe away the tears from her face, his voice gentle but resolute, declaring that he loved her. And if that love was wrong, then he no longer wished to be right. Emma looked at him for a long time, weighing all her fear, all her wounds, all the barricades she had once built, and then very slowly she nodded, not with words but with her eyes, with a tight trembling grip of his hand, and with an unsteady embrace between two people who had once believed themselves unworthy of love, and in that moment there was no past, no shadow of the Mafia world, no threats lurking beyond the walls. Only one man who had lost everything, and one woman who had lived in fear, now touching each other with the full truth of their hearts. Emma did not say the words "I love you" yet, as she rested her cheek against his chest, listening to the rhythm of his heart. Dominic knew she had chosen to stay, and that for him was more precious than any vow, and in the quiet room, with only the whisper of wind through the curtains, they held each other for a long time, as if the world had finally granted them one chance, and this time they would not let it slip away. Life after their confession did not turn Emma and Dominic into a fairy tale couple living in a rose-covered castle, but instead everything became more real than ever before. For Emma, loving a man like Dominic meant stepping into an entirely foreign world, where rules were unwritten, where loyalty was measured in blood, and where love could not exist without courage. In the early days, she felt like an actor on a strange stage, learning to read the unspoken language between men in black suits, with cold, searching eyes. Dominic hid nothing from her, and that was the first thing that made her feel respected. He did not disguise his work, nor dress his life in beautiful words. He spoke plainly of alliances, of brutal decisions made to protect his family, and of the fragile line between morality and survival. And it was precisely that honesty that made Emma trust him more. Dominic never forced her to become part of his work. He allowed her to choose, and Emma chose not to turn away. She no longer wished to stand on the outside, trembling each time he left the house. She wanted to understand, and to truly become part of the life of the man she loved, and so she learned. She learned to sit through closed family meetings in silence, to distinguish allies from enemies. She questioned Luca Dominic's right hand about the ties between families and the hidden history that stretched across decades, and little by little she was no longer an outsider. She became the woman the guards bowed to with respect, and the only one whose words could still Dominic's rage when it surged too swiftly. Lily grew surrounded by the warmth Emma brought, and during candlelit dinners in the great dining hall amid the sound of their daughter's laughter, Dominic often looked at Emma as though she were the only miracle his life had ever been given. One morning, as Dominic prepared to leave to resolve a conflict, Emma no longer hid as she once had. She no longer kept her farewell locked in her heart, nor allowed fear to steal her voice. She embraced him before everyone, and whispered the same simple words that unfailingly made him fall silent each time he heard them. "Come back to me," and he always did. Those who once doubted her slowly came to trust her, as they watched Dominic change not into a weaker man but into one who listened, who was no longer coldly indifferent but deeper, more cautious, and more compassionate. Emma's presence did not diminish his strength but gave it a different form, a strength born of peace he had never known he longed for. Once a man from another family spoke an insult toward Emma at a banquet, and Dominic did not need to raise a hand, because Emma rose calmly, met the man's gaze, and with a single steady sentence silenced the entire table. When Dominic took her home that night, he could not hide the pride in his eyes, and told her that she had become a woman of this world without losing herself. And Emma knew it was the highest praise she had ever received. Each night when the mansion sank into silence, Dominic would draw her into his arms, kiss her hair, and whisper as though afraid that if he did not speak, she might fade into a dream that he still could not believe she was truly there. And Emma would smile softly and hold him tighter, replying that she too had once believed she would never find home. And now, within a world of darkness and secrecy, they had become each other's light. Not perfect, nor easy, but real, and enough for two once shattered souls to believe that love, wherever it grows, if it is strong enough, will always find a way to survive. That spring, the garden of the mansion blossomed with its first tulips, and Lily ran freely across the green lawn, her skirt flaring with every light step, her clear laughter echoing through the air as if washing away the shadows of the past. While Emma sat on the stone steps with a book in her hands, her eyes following her little daughter with a gaze softened by deep love. And from a distance, Dominic approached carrying 2 warm cups of coffee, stopping beside her before sitting down and offering her a familiar smile he had never worn on the day they first met. Their life was no longer a chain of fear and struggle. The scars of yesterday had not disappeared, but they were slowly stitched together with love, patience, and forgiveness. Dominic remained the head of his family, yet the cold authority in his eyes had given way to the quiet warmth of a husband and a father. Emma did not only find love, she found home. The one thing she had searched for her entire life without truly knowing where to look. In every shared meal, every embrace, every whispered goodnight, she felt that she finally belonged here, no longer lost, no longer fighting the world alone. Love had arrived when she least expected it, in circumstances no one could have wished for. Yet that very unexpectedness made it more precious and more real than ever before. She had once risked her life to protect a child, never knowing that single act would open a door to a new life and to a true family. The story of Emma and Dominic is not only a love story, it is a journey of healing, a testament that sometimes, even in the darkest places, if you still choose what is right, the light will come. And perhaps in real life, each of us carries invisible wounds and unspoken fears. But perhaps just one choice to trust, one choice to love, is enough for the miracle meant for you to find its way. And how do you feel after hearing this story? Does it remind you of yourself? Of someone who once walked into your life like the last light at the end of a tunnel? Share your true feelings with us in the comments below, because we always wish to listen to the thoughts that come from the deepest part of every viewer's heart. And if this story has touched your soul in any way, do not forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with those you love. We will continue to bring you moving, dramatic, and deeply human stories every day so that with each listening you may find empathy, faith, and hope. Thank you for staying with this story until its very last moment. We wish you always good health, a life of peace and gentleness each day, and a heart filled with love. Goodbye, and we look forward to seeing you again in the next video.